morning.
Hello. Good morning
How
to
are you?
you. Everything is good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Waking up still.
What time is it there?
It is 9 a.m.
9 a.m. Not too bad. It's 8 in the evening here.
Yeah, the nearly 12 hours back.
Yeah. Well, you guys are ahead anyway. It's Monday for you. It's still Sunday for me. So
Yeah.
very good. Is anyone else joining us or is just you and
Uh,
I?
I think it's just me this morning. It's today
Okay.
is Henry's birthday, so he gets the
Okay.
day off for interviews. And
Yeah.
Lewis is not normally a morning person. Normally it's me and Henry on these morning ones.
Very good. Well, we can start then. And, first of all, before we talk about the new record, you guys did a tour with Kerry King early in the year. How did that tour go for you guys?
Oh man, it was great. It was a little different actually. I will say that this was one of the first tours we've done over the past few years that the audience response, I'm gonna say, was mixed. Because like the thrash metal genre title that we often get
Yeah.
given, not that we always agreed with that, we actually sort of chalked that down to the New Zealand media not really understanding metal. And so when the band first came out, they used to be like, Alien Weaponry, this thrash metal band. But when you're on a tour with Kerry King and Municipal Waste, who are clearly thrash metal, we don't feel very thrash metal. But so from the audience perspective, it was, we had some great shows and we had some not great shows, which of course is to be expected sometimes. But it was a very special tour because Kerry King had actually specifically asked for us to be on that tour. So this wasn't a case of like promoters just doing their job behind the scenes
Yeah.
and putting bands together. Kerry had actually chosen us out of a list and said, I would like this band to come on. And he'd heard us on Sirius XM,
Yeah.
and was like, I like this band, man. I want to have them on tour with us. So that was very special, and it was cool to watch somebody like Kerry. When we get this awesome opportunity to be with, whether it's Kerry or whether it's Gojira or whoever it is, because we're so fresh in our career, you'd be silly to not try and learn something from these bands who have been doing it for a long time. And someone like Kerry King he's been a touring musician for longer than we've been alive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's crazy. I'm 25. He's been doing it for like 40 years. And so witnessing his professionalism and his expertise, not even just from him and his band, but also from his crew. We learned so much from his crew, and we shared some of his crew. His crew were willing to help us out because we had a limited crew availability for that tour, and just sort of sitting back and taking notes, I think, was the real highlight of that tour, and learning from people who have been doing it much longer than we have.
Yeah. And, you were mentioning the crowd's reactions. I think it's, at the end, it's very good for you because you're facing people that probably weren't aware of who you guys were. So it's an opportunity to conquer them, so to say,
Right.
instead of playing for a crowd that already knows you and they know what they're going for. And probably some of those were seeing you guys for the first time, hearing you for the first time. So it was a great opportunity to, put the word out there for them as well.
Yeah, that's right. And we only had a half an hour to do so. So it's like, for us, it's half an hour to put on the craziest, most, or like almost over the top, like we would never perform that hard in a headline set because you wouldn't be able to do it, but when you've only got half an hour, it's like you go 200% and you walk off that stage, you can barely breathe, you can, you're dripping in sweat, but you can only hope that you've left such an impression on this crowd that even if they didn't really like you, they're like, oh, check them out though, because that was a good show, whether they don't like the music, because that's one thing we see a lot of is people who haven't quite made their mind up on the band go, oh, I don't really know about the music, but they put on a hell of a show, So like when you're doing that, that's the best you can give them outside of it, because the music part, of course, is very subjective, and it's not going to resonate with everybody. So we try our hardest to at least leave an impression with the headbanging.
I saw you guys a couple times. You guys played here in Portugal a couple times. And that's one of the things about you guys. When it comes to the live show, you guys give it all. And I mean, you might say the music is not my thing, but you are not indifferent. After watching a concert from Alien Weaponry, you're going to remember the name. And that's the most important thing.
That's right. That's all you can hope for.
Yeah. And, let's speak about Terra, the new records. I'm not very good at pronouncing these names, but I'm going to try the best. When did you guys start working on the songs for the album?
Oh, I think as me personally, I started earlier than the boys did, because I knew that with this third album coming up would be the first time me as the new band member had an opportunity to write for the album. And so I like to write in the sort of comfort of my own home, so if an idea strikes, I just sit down on my computer and I get it down, and it comes in waves. I'm not like constantly writing. So I remember I had this bug to write, and I just wrote a bunch. I think I wrote 15 songs in the first wave, and then I didn't write anything for months, and then I think, because this was like not long after the second album had dropped, so it was not like we were in a rush to be writing the third one. But then we'd done all the Gojira tours, and I think we'd come off the second of the 3 Gojira tours, and then it was like us as a band were like, okay, let's get into writing now and prepare for this next journey, and so then it kind of officially kicked off the process, I suppose, where we were all writing, and sat down, and I went away and I wrote more songs, and then they went and wrote their songs, and then we came together with all we'd had and started getting to work, filtering through, picking our faves. But one thing that we did do on this album, because it was something that they didn't do on the second album that they wanted to change, was that every song that made it on the second album was every song that was written.
Okay.
So there was no excess. So there are songs on that album that Lewis, for example, was kind of like, I don't really like that song, which you never want. You never want a song on your album that you don't like. But of course, that second album fell in they recorded some of that during COVID, and it was like, it was all, so there were sort of circumstances at play, because that was not the case with the first album. The first album was made up of their best songs out of 20, their best 10 out of 20 or whatever. So it was just an unfortunate thing that happened with the second album, that they were like, we don't want this to happen again. So I think we hit close to nearly 30 songs on this demos, for this third album. I had written 20, and I think Lewis had written about 10. And so we had a lot to pick from. And, we turned them all into because one of the things that I said to the band is no riffs. We're not leaving riffs in a folder. We're making full songs. A riff does nothing until it's a song. So even if you turn it into a song you don't like, it's still a complete framework to work from. Whereas a riff sitting in a Google Drive folder for 20 years may become nothing, because it doesn't have anything else supporting it, even if what's supporting it you don't like. So we turned everything into a demo. Plenty of songs that we didn't like, but we completed them just to keep the train moving. And then, of course, sort of maybe every 5 songs you have a song you really like. And then comes the studio part, where we'd given Josh Wilbur the demos, and he goes, I love these songs, but then he does, this is the thing, these riffs are great, let's make another song out of these riffs. See, so those riffs that may have been sitting in the dark corners of a Google Drive link were brought to the studio because they were part of a complete song, and then our producer was able to go, we can make a whole song out of these riffs. So it's been a 3 to 4 year long process anyway, I would say.
But you were mentioning Josh Wilbur, the producer. It was your first time working with him, first time recording in LA. How was the experience having someone, who is very experienced. He worked like Megadeth, Avenged Sevenfold, name the bands, Lamb of God. He worked with them all. How important it is to have someone that has like a fresh ear and listening to your stuff and saying, this is good, this is not so good, but we can make this better. How does it feel to work with with a guy so experienced like Jorge?
Yeah, I mean, it was awesome for a start. It was the best move we could have made. Although we knew with this album, we were going to work with somebody new. That's what we knew going into it. We said the boys had worked with their father for the last two records. He co-produced the first one. I can't quite remember who actually did the production on the first one, but his father was a part of it. And then their father did the entire second record. And he's a knowledgeable person, but hasn't been, I wouldn't say limited, but like someone like Josh, of course, has so much under his belt that he's learned from working with so many bands. You know what I mean? And so we were kind of like, what do we need to take the band forward? Maybe it's a fresh set of ears, like you said, and a fresh set of experience. And Josh was not our first pick, not that we didn't want him. It was more that we assumed we couldn't get him from a budget perspective. So we were talking with a bunch of other producers, and great producers too, and I'm still in contact with some of them because we just got along very well. But Josh ended up coming quite last minute because our manager was like, budget update, we can hire someone like Josh Wilbur if you want it, and we were like, well, of course we want it, So that was like, but we were a little nervous because we didn't really meet Josh. Like I said, we'd actually had full-on interviews with these other producers and kind of knew how we got, if we gelled. Yeah. But Josh was just kind of like, it's Josh Wilbur, so if you can afford it, you should probably do it. Yeah. And we were like, let's just hope we get along, And we had like 2 phone calls with him, but we were on a European headline run at the time and doing all the festivals and there, and he was busy like recording another record, and we were like, oh, I guess we'll see when we get there. And so, we flew straight from that European tour straight to LA. But by the end of day one, it was like we'd been mates forever. He was super. Yeah, we just kind of he got our humor and all that stuff like from just a outside of the job side of it, and then in the job side of it, he understood the music, he understood the vision. And also sort of credit to the boys that they were open to then his criticism or creative input as well, which I told the boys going into it. I said, because of course it being their father in the past, you can get a little like, no, dad, don't tell me what to do, And I was like, Josh is not your dad. I would... If he tells you he wants to change something, entertain it at least. Yeah. You can say you don't like it, but you can't say you don't like it before you try it. So that was our sort of thing as well from our end, was like be open to his knowledge and his skills. And but it ended up being not an issue at all. I think the only bit that maybe Lewis fought back a little bit was Josh recognized Lewis's singing capabilities and sort of pushed for more melody. And then I think Lewis was a little bit like metal elitist and was like, but I'm a metal band, I don't want to be singing too much. But then Josh was like, yeah, but you're a metal band who can sing, so utilize it, you know what I mean? And in the end, they kind of, he got over it and he welcomed it.
Yeah, and the thing, listening to the record, those clean singing parts, they are really good, and they sound really good. So, I see no problem in it.
That's right. That's right.
If it brings the song up, if it makes it better, fucking do it. Don't be afraid. Right. And listen, I'm old. I was 18, and I remember that I was just, metal is metal. I cannot listen to anything else.
Right.
But, after a few years, you're like, why can I not listen to other kinds of music and enjoy it as well, but still be a metal guy? After you need some years to get that experience.
Right.
And to get over that fact. But, the album is great. One of the things I I noted on the album is a bit more polished. I think the songs, you know, there is no fat in them, if we can say like that. Everything seems to be right on the money, and it works amazingly on this new record. And I think, working with a guy like Josh, I mean, for you guys, for the future, for future records and future songwriting, you can apply some of these things you guys use on this record. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, because for me personally, not that this discredits the boys' work, of course, but I'm the only one of the three of us that has musical, like training. What do you call it? Musical theory knowledge.
Yeah,
that's the word I'm thinking of. So for me, that was the first thing I said to the boys going into this album is, we're cutting out all that filler. Sometimes they write a song and it just keeps going and going and going. I'm like, but there's like, so to speak, there's no structure, if you're going to put it like that. So for me, that was my first like criticism going into this album. I said, we're going to cut out the filler. So the first song that Lewis gave me, for example, I said, all right, this riff here, half the time, boom, verse, repeat it for the, blah, 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 blah. And so we were taking sort of 5.5, 6 minute long songs and getting them down to the 4 minute kind of range, which was where we were aiming for. And I thought that was pretty good. I said, look, now we're singing it, not too many bits of repeating. And then Josh, he went and did it again. So he'd cut another 30 seconds off, So it was like a perfect collaboration of that knowledge, where he was like, you don't need to repeat that for that long. You could just keep it nice and concise. And you really notice it live, for example, like when we're singing the old songs and we feel like we're repeating a line over and over, and then we sing the new song and it's like, start, boom, it's done, and the crowd's like, woohoo, and you're ready to move on. And so that, you're right, it's definitely a lot of polish, a lot of fine tuning the sound. How much can you get in before it gets stale, and add textures, and that was like the vocal thing again, like which is what we said to Lewis, as much melody as there is on this end, he's also got now for the first time like really aggressive vocals, which have never been on an Alien Weaponry, so now there's like a wider spectrum of sound and texture on the album that all plays into a more interesting and non-monotone experience, I think.
Yeah. That's one of the things about this kind of music. I mean, if you're like Dream Theater, you can have the luxury of playing a 20-minute song because people expect that. And you have those kind of bands have the musicianship to play that long without, falling on a trap. When it comes to a more like trash, death, whatever, more extreme music, you really need to be more concise so people don't get distracted or tired of a song. So shorten it, makes it better because it actually works, and you're ready for some more. And I think that's one of the things about this album. It's like, it's not tiring. You're finished with one song, the other one comes next, and you still want more. And I think that's very important. You don't want to, after listening to an album, and say, okay, I'm going to give it a break for 2 weeks.
Right. Exactly. And I think what the problem was that Kai Tangata, the most popular song the band has ever released, is nearly 7 minutes long.
Yeah.
So it became this, but I said it's the exception, not the rule. I said Kai Tangata is a very rare song. It is our like golden egg song, where that you've got a song that is, in its nature, it's like 2 riffs, the entire song for 7 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, and yet it never feels like 7 minutes. Yeah. Even when we play it, it still feels as quick as a song that's 4 minutes. It is a very rare thing. But I think there was a part in the boys' process where it was like, oh, this song was really popular at 7 minutes, we can just write 7 minute song. I'm like, no. Again, it's the exception, not the rule, because otherwise, you're right. For the most part, you just rein it in. And I think one thing that we at least tried to achieve on the album, like you were saying, is like, you listen to one song, you enjoyed it, it's over. And then the next song is different sounding.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like whether we do that by changing tunings, whether we're doing that by changing the languages. If you're listening in order, for those people out there that like to listen to an album in order, it keeps it also every song sort of sounding fresh and sounding different, you know, instead of banging all the drop C sharp songs in Māori one after each other and then all the English, you know, it's like you chop and change it to kind of keep the audience going, oh yeah, it's a little different. Oh, it's a little different.
And, you know, you guys have, you know, again, lyrics in Maori, which is part of Alien Weaponry, you know, identity. How important it is still, you know, to write those songs in your native language. And obviously there is the challenge of everybody outside of New Zealand not understanding. But I think every language is universal in the sense that you can understand if it's sad, if it's, you know, happier, if there's like a mood there, you can understand that. And listen to your songs in Maori, even though I don't understand the word, you know, what it means, I can feel it. And you guys are conscious of, you know, that can be a barrier there for fans, but, you know, it works, still it works and works well.
Yeah, so for us it's very important that we continue to write in Māori because there is some subject matter that we feel can only really be appropriately told through the medium that is te reo Māori. But when it comes to the, you know, the audience thing, yeah, we see the sort of two ends of this. On one end, we often talk about how outside of music, haka, right? Obviously, if anybody knows about something Māori, it's the haka.
Yeah.
And the haka is quite popular online, and it has been now for the past 5-10 years. And one thing you notice when you go into the comment sections under a video of someone doing a haka, whether it's for a wedding or a funeral or whatever it is people from all over the world going, I have no idea what they're saying, but I can feel the passion.
Yeah.
You know, that is the key, I think, to the experience of listening to Alien Weaponry for a lot of people, is you may have no idea what the heck we're talking about, but you can feel the energy. You know, you can, and I've been saying this in other interviews, for lack of a better phrase, it ignites the monkey part of our brain. You know, you just kind of go, oh, why am I responding to it like this? You know, why does it sound so, and then, of course, for those who wish to dive deeper, all our songs have the translations, you know, out there on the internet. We make sure that when an album is released, we provide a lot of the translations for the usual translation lyric websites, so that they're all our translations and they're all accurate. So for those who wish to know what it is we're singing about, it's really awesome too. We even have people say, I'm learning Māori just so that I can know what you're talking about, which is really cool, of course, as a language that we're trying to revive and keep alive. On the other end of that is this really interesting, and it just happened on this recent tour, which is why it's in my mind, of this, like, they just listen and they actually have no idea what we're talking about. And then they look it up and all of a sudden, oh, wait, you guys are woke. Keep politics out of music. I'm like, who have you been listening to for the past 8 years? You know, like what band? This band has always been singing about these things. You know what I mean? So there's this other sort of, although I would say they're the minority, but there is this other end of that spectrum where it's that they really just be listening because they think it sounds cool and have never absorbed it further. And then the band will post something like, for example, there was a bunch of protests here in New Zealand because of our right-wing government at the moment, trying to undo our like founding document, which was the treaty agreement between Māori and the Crown. And we posted something on our socials about, like, because we were on tour and this is where you can support the protests and whatever. And then people in the comments going, oh, I used to like this band and now they're political. And I was like, what? We've always been like this. You know what I mean? It's like, so what did you think you were listening to for the past 5 years? On the other end of the not understanding the lyrics. So we see both ends. Luckily that side is a lot smaller. This side is great, and we see it all the time.
Yeah, but it's always the minority are always loud, as they say. Anyway.
Right, the vocal minority.
Yeah, and you talked about the haka, and I remember, obviously for New Zealand rugby team, every time they play the haka, it's probably the most watched part of the match.
Right.
But I remember a video going viral. It was from the New Zealand Parliament where these girls just ripped the paper and they went into the haka thing, and I absolutely loved it because you could feel, the energy and, why she was doing it. And
yeah, that's right.
And it was amazing. And the way the video went viral, it was, a good thing anyway. But, it's pretty amazing that, how a ritual, a haka can, transcend borders, and people will get the feeling of it. And on this record, you guys have Randy Blythe from Lamb of God. I know you were the one that contacted him without anyone knowing. When you delivered the news, what was their reaction?
Oh yeah, I mean it was as you could imagine, like especially for Lewis, who that is his band of all time, so that's the which is of course is why I didn't tell anyone, because if he said no, then that would be very disappointed. But luckily he said yes, and because I knew as well that because of the way that Lewis idolizes, I suppose, for lack of a better word, that band, or how important that band is to him, he never would have had he never would have reached out of like respect, so to speak. So I was like, there's only one person that's going to do it, and it's going to be me. But thankfully, Randy had already kind of broken the ice, so to speak, because he'd watched some of the social media stuff that I post on my personal social media, and he'd bought a book that I recommended about Maori culture, and he'd sent me a message like, hey man, I bought this book you recommended and I really enjoy it. And that was the first message we'd ever shared with each other. So, but it was easy. That means he kind of broke the ice, so it wasn't like me having to reach out to him. He'd already initiated conversation. So on my side of it, it wasn't too tricky, but they're all just people at the end of the day, and we're all musicians, and we're all in the, we're all used to it. And of course, they are, of course, at a different caliber and a different league to where we are right now. But I see us all as people just trying to make art that we love and tell our stories and express our emotions and through this medium. So I said, and it's always the thing, if you don't ask, the answer is already no. That's the classic saying. So if he says no when you ask, if you didn't ask, it was still no. So you already have no, you just want the yes now.
The only difference sometimes is if you never ask, you will keep in your mind, what if I did? And that's the worst feeling that you can have.
It is the worst. I'm like, at least if you just ask and they say no, it was a no. Cool. And of course, in our circumstance, thankfully, it was a yes. And that was it was really awesome, and of course, tricky because we're in New Zealand. He is where he lives. And when we were in LA, he was on tour at the time. And I actually saw him. He'd played in LA a week after we wrapped recording, and the boys had gone home. But my girlfriend lives in Los Angeles, so I was staying with her, and I was like, oh, Lamb of God playing. So I messaged Randy, hey, if you want to talk about this new song, I'll be in LA. So I went out to the show. And that was the only like face-to-face part we had during his collaboration. But it was all we needed, really. We gave him full control over his lyrics. So every lyric that he performs was written by Randy. And we just gave him the song and the section, and gave him free reign. And he was awesome. He was like super respectful of he wanted Māori. He wanted to say some Māori words. So he says taniwha and he says taiaha in the song. And he kept checking with me that what he was singing about was like culturally appropriate and all this. And we were like, we had no notes. We didn't change anything. We were like, man, this is perfect. This is not only is it great lyrics, from a musical perspective, it's a very culturally aware, you know. So like, 'cause, you know, he's obviously a very educated person and understood what it was that he was singing about. And so then at some point after all that, Josh flew to his home and recorded him like in his lounge, you know.
Yeah.
They stacked up mattresses and blankets, and there's like, we've got this great photo of him like in his lounge, like under all like a homemade pillow fort to record his bit. And it turned out, we knew it was going to be cool, but we do think it turned out better than we could have possibly imagined. You know, it's a super awesome collaboration. We're very grateful that Randy felt willing to be a part of it.
Yeah, and to wrap it up, we are, you know, close to the end. Touring plans. What are the plans for you guys? Europe, when that's going to happen? You have any idea? Anything you can say yet?
Yeah, we don't know yet. The only thing, we're kicking off a New Zealand tour in 1 week. It's our first time doing a headline tour since 2020. It's been nearly 5 years since the last time we played like proper home shows in New Zealand. So we're looking forward to that. And then that finishes right as the album drops. And then that's currently where our schedule blanks. And now there's nothing set in stone. All we know is that our managers or whoever are doing that stuff, they just kind of say, be prepared for something, you know, and that's it. And we're like, okay. And, you know, do we need to get time off work? You know, like, what's the deal here? And they go, oh, be ready for something here. Like, okay, when we hear from you, we'll hear from you, I guess. So as it currently stands, nothing further than the album release itself.
So we can expect a tour anyway. I'm sure that's going to happen.
You would hope so. Imagine that we drop an album, we never leave, we never go on tour. That would be great. Well, to be fair, that's what happened with COVID, but we're not in COVID anymore. So we hope that this album falls and doesn't do the COVID thing again.
Yeah, hopefully not. All right, Tūranga, thank you very much for your time. All the best for Alien Weaponry.
Hey, thank you very much, man.
The new record is awesome. You know, as I said, very polished. You know, go straight to the point. You guys did a great job. Josh Wilbur did a great job as well. So keep it going, and hopefully we'll see you guys back in Portugal soon. All right?
Hey, thank you very much. We love Portugal too, so we want to come back.
Yes. All right. Have a great day, and see you soon.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Yeah, see you later.
Bye.